Coming up on At Issue, the holidays are coming, and that means so are the chances for scam artists. On this week's episode, Detective Tony West from the Charleston Police Department is discussing how to keep your money and personal information safe. Stay tuned. At Issue starts right now. Welcome and thanks for joining us for At Issue. I'm your host, Kate Pleasant. The holidays are getting closer and it's a good time of the year for a reminder to be on the lookout for scam artists. The FBI reports that in 2012 they averaged more than 24,000 internet fraud complaints per month. Unverified losses were up over 8% from 2012, and that's just in internet crimes alone. Door-to-door, telephone, and other types of scams account for hundreds of thousands of lost dollars every year. And that's what we're talking about today with Detective Tony West from the Charleston Police Department. Thanks for joining us today.
Certainly.
We appreciate you coming in and talk about this. I know it can affect a lot of people. So,
it does. Yeah.
Can you first define for us what is a scam?
The easiest definition, I guess, would be that it's just the misleading or tricking, maybe exploiting a person for financial gain. Typically, it's almost always for financial gain. People trying to steal money from other people.
Okay, so it's usually money involved, not
Yes.
a lot of other things. It's money motivated.
Yep.
Okay, and so what kinds of scams are popular right now or have been in the past?
Right now, there's a handful. We've had the lottery scams for several years now, through usually Nigeria or maybe Jamaica. People getting unsolicited emails stating that they've won some amount of money just out of the blue for no apparent reason. And people fall for these scams for obvious reasons, I guess, based on financial need.
The kind where you have to give them money, right? You give them money and then they'll send you your money. That's usually how it goes, right?
Most of the scams that we deal with are internet-based, to be honest with you. We did recently have a scam involving the paving of driveways and things like that in Coles County. Those are not too frequent. Usually,
that was more of a door-to-door?
I guess it would fall into the lines of door-to-door. It's usually internet. Telemarketing is still out there, of course, but primarily internet-based anymore.
And why do you think that is? Do you think that's the anonymity, or is it easier for people to do these things over the internet?
It is easier. There is no face-to-face confrontation or contact with people. They're anonymous. The ease of access, you can get a hold of anybody via the internet anymore with emails and smartphones and all of those things. So it's very simple to reach out to people.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the lottery scam. What are some of the other kind of popular ones that we may have heard of or need to be aware of?
There's one that affects the elderly. It's been coined the grandparent scam, where a grandparent, an elderly person, will get a random phone call from somebody claiming to be a grandchild, and the grandchild is in need of assistance. Their car broke down, they're in a foreign country, they need some money sent to them. And the elderly people, not hearing from their grandkids too frequently sometimes, will think, well, that sounds like my grandson or granddaughter, and they will send money overseas, usually via money order or Western Union, something like that, to the location that this person's at. That's one that we've run into here in Charleston. That's a fairly popular one right now.
Okay. And so do we see these scams at different times of year? Are they more popular around the holidays when people are feeling like they want to give, or is this kind of an all-year thing?
I wish it was just certain points of the year from a law enforcement perspective, simply because it would help limit the amount of work or hours we have to use trying to investigate these cases. Unfortunately, it is a year-round thing. Now, that being said, the holidays, people are more prone to giving, trying to donate to Salvation Army, for example. Sometimes it's sad to say, Salvation Armies have that distinct look, the red kettle, the bell.
Right.
Some people will try to imitate that just to get people to put money, loose change out of their pocket into these things. So, holidays do have people that come out of the woodwork and they set up fake web pages, for example, and offer very low priced items. So that should be a red flag to people. If it's so low that you have to think to yourself, wow, that's a really good deal, you might want to second guess that and not visit that website, because the chances are you're going to send money somewhere and never get that product.
Okay, so you may not see that if you send
Right.
it that way. So do they target certain people? You mentioned seniors. Is it always seniors? Are they quote easier to take advantage of, or do they target everyone in these scams?
They do. Everyone is a target. Myself, for example, I could be a target just as simply as an elderly person. I think the elderly fall victim to it more frequently for a multitude of reasons. One of them being they just are not well versed in the internet, for example, or emails or technology in general, and they fall victim a lot of times to the telemarketing scams, people offering money. It's most of the population, when they hear that there's some sort of easy money, they listen to it because everybody would like to have more money than what they have. So it's a hook, and sometimes people will take the bait and sometimes they will not.
Do you think being in a rural area sometimes can aid in that too? We seem to be a little more trustworthy than maybe some of the more urban areas.
Yeah, it's less frequent, or at least you hear about it less in these areas than maybe the big cities. But we are just as vulnerable simply because we all have access to the internet.
Okay. And so how do you investigate a scam? If someone calls and says, I think I've been scammed, how do you go about starting to figure that out?
The victims in scams will typically do a majority of the investigative work prior to even filing a police report. First step is filing the report. Next step is for the officer to get as much information from the victim as possible and take that information and, using investigative tools, or maybe even sometimes reaching out to connections that we may have with the FBI or maybe the Federal Trade Commission, sometimes the Illinois Attorney General's office. There are ways that if we don't have the means or the resources at a local police department, because the smaller the police department is, the less resources typically they will have to investigate these things. So we will take it as far as we can. Oftentimes we will recommend that the victim reach out through the Federal Trade Commission, through the Illinois Attorney General's office, so that they have other avenues, other paperwork, other things to follow up on their own. Because the sad truth is the victims will spend more money than what they've already lost trying to make it right or make it better. And they'll do a lot of the legwork in the investigative process.
So are these internet thieves catchable? I mean, they don't have faces. Are they catchable?
Yes and no. Very difficult to catch. A lot of the scams that we see, at least in the Charleston area, are people from overseas. We've had Puerto Rico, for example, Nigeria, Jamaica, other countries where these things are coming in, because it's very simple using the internet, the click of a mouse, and you can communicate with people across the world. So they just send the money overseas, and it's very hard. My boss isn't going to give me the permission to hop on a jet and go down to Jamaica and try and investigate something.
Right.
It's very difficult to identify who the culprit or culprits are.
So what do you do in that case? The same thing, you kind of investigate it to the best of your ability with the resources that we have?
Right, and if we can get to a point where we might be able to forward that information on to a federal entity or even a state entity that has more resources to investigate it further, then we will do that, and then work as a team to try to figure out who or where this is happening.
Okay. And so what's the motivator for a lot of this? Is it usually just greed, do you find, or is it, people are actually trying to get money for charity and they're doing it in a scam manner? I mean, what's their typical motivators?
Typically, it's greed. People just want money, and that's really the bottom line. I don't have a big elaborate answer for that
Right.
one. It is what it is. It's greed.
Are there specific types of people that carry out these scams? Are they people that have had trouble in the past, or is it specific groups of people?
To be honest, the scammer is anybody. It could be anybody, that all walks of life. They could be from a very well-off family, have the highest education, or it could be somebody that's come from the lower socioeconomic statuses, and there's really no rhyme nor reason to who. It literally could be anybody.
Okay, so what should we be looking out for to know something is a scam?
Okay. Well, emails, for example, if you're getting unsolicited emails from just out of the blue about, hey, you've won this amount of money for this lottery, I would not believe it, simply because, first of all, did you play that particular lottery? Did you somehow connect with Nigeria or Jamaica and play the lottery there? Check for example, online, the HTTPS that comes before any URL or address that you type into the internet. The S stands for secure. So if that S is missing, it doesn't mean it's not secure, but it's more likely to not be a secure website. That's one thing you could look out for when you're on the internet. Unsolicited emails. I can't sit here and explain in much detail how to go about ensuring that an email that you get is legitimate or a scam, because there's so many steps in doing it. There's many resources online to help educate people on what to look for.
And do they call that phishing? Is that what that's considered?
Phishing, yes. Phishing is simply with a PH. It's phishing for somebody's information. They're phishing for maybe social security numbers, dates of birth, names, bank account numbers, things of that sort, yeah.
So you should never give someone that information over the internet.
No, you should not.
That's probably the safest way to stay away from that.
Right. I say you shouldn't, but there, of course, most of us, at least myself, I pay most of my bills online anymore. So, but if you know that the website you're dealing with is the normal or typical site that you deal with, giving that information, it's probably a more secure thing. But if you're getting unsolicited emails asking for these things, passwords, account numbers, your banks aren't going to send those requests to you. They're not going to ask you for your passwords or for your account information over the internet or through emails. They're going to have you come in and talk to them in person. So those are red flags. You shouldn't respond to those emails.
And you see that in a lot of, company privacy policies and things like that. They say, we will never ask for your email address, your personal information or anything like that via the internet, so don't give it to us. I guess if you were in doubt, should you look for a number that's related to that and call to check, or?
Yes, a lot of, in my research over the course of the years, the BBB, the Better Business Bureau, is one that they recommend you go to. If there's a company that's contacting you through the email and you're wondering if it's legitimate or not, that's one place to look. If there's a number associated with the link that you get, call that number. If it's a scam, more times than not, in my experience, it's been there's broken English in the email itself. It doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't flow. Oftentimes when you call the line, maybe a foreign voice on the other end, somebody that doesn't speak really good English. Those are some of the things to look out for.
Are there other red flags that we should be looking for?
Other red flags? I guess not necessarily. There's so many red flags, but if it's, and this is cliche, I guess, but if it sounds too good to be true, it is probably too good to be true.
That's a good point. So definitely keep that in mind. What about banking and ATM scams? Is that still a thing? Does that still happen?
Yes, it is. It is still a thing. The scams we're talking about earlier with emails and things like that, they almost always involve a bank in some aspect. Whether it's them sending you what is typically a fraudulent or counterfeit check, and you take it to your bank, put it in the account, and a few days go by and no red flags come up through the bank, so you think it's good, they think it's good. You then withdraw that money from your account and you send some of that back via money order, only to find out 2 or 3 days after that it is a fraudulent or counterfeit check. Your bank is involved. So more times than not, you may be reimbursed by your bank, you may not. ATM scams are still very prevalent. There's different types. There's a device called a skimmer. It's just a small device that when somebody thinking they're putting it into the ATM or maybe at the gas station, they're swiping their card to pay for the gas. The skimmer is a device that can magnetically read the information on the card number, the security code that's on the back of the card, things like that. And people with that information can go online and make a lot of purchases using that information. And then before, it could be a day or two before you're made aware, and by then they've wiped out your account.
Sure, I was going to say they could run your credit card up to the limit before you even knew about it. So how would you recognize a skimmer, or can you?
You can. Usually it's going to be an additional attachment that's been placed on the outside of an ATM or the outside of a gas pump where you slide your card in. I would say the majority of the time it's probably a black device, but I'm sure they can range in colors too. But if it doesn't look like the pump should look, or for example, you're at a gas station, you look at the other 3 or 4 pumps next to you, if they don't have that, that would be a red flag.
So one of these isn't like the others. Pay
Right.
attention maybe when you're out getting your gas and things like that. Okay, that's definitely a good point. What about holidays and credit cards? Do you have to watch out for that? The same thing? When you're running your credit card a lot at retailers and things like that, buying your Christmas gifts, is there things to be careful with there?
There are. For the most part, we don't run into too much of that, at least locally.
Right.
But again, the skimmers can come into play because at a restaurant, for example, you could give the waitress or waiter your card. They run off and, they ring up your bill and they put it on your card. Well, let's say they're up to no good and they have one of these skimming devices. They can also run it through there, and then they have your information. They can take that information and put it on counterfeit cards, so they can just run around using a card with your information, racking up bills and things of that nature.
Okay, so it's kind of easy for them, huh?
It
People
can
that
be.
really need to
It
get
can
that.
be. And that's why it's important for when a victim reports this type of crime, it's important for them to try to narrow down when and where it may have happened so that we have an avenue to investigate.
Okay, what about protecting ourselves, like our credit cards and things like that? What are your recommendations for all types of situations and scams? How do we keep ourselves safe from those?
Well, naturally, sometimes people lose them, and then there are our suspects grab onto them that way, and they will go around and use them. But if you know you're going to go shopping, maybe take your card with you. I know that it's hard to tell people not to take their cards with them everywhere they go because you never know what's going to happen. I would say carrying cash is probably the safest bet. Yes, if you lose your wallet or somebody pickpockets you, for example, you may lose that $200 cash that you had in there, but it's the lesser of two evils. Would you rather $200 cash be gone or your debit credit cards not knowing where they're being spent?
Because now they have access to that information to continue to drain your account rather than just that amount of cash you were carrying on you.
Right. And in addition to that, don't carry your Social Security card in your wallet. Your debit cards, don't write your PIN on the card itself. Don't keep it in your wallet. Memorize it. That's how oftentimes if somebody grabs your debit card and they run to an ATM, they're able to use it because the PIN might have been written on the back of the card or on a little note in the wallet.
Okay, so memorization is a good tip.
Yes.
And what if you think you've been a victim of a scam? What do you do?
The first thing you want to do is call the local police department where you live. Your card may have been used 5 states away, but the jurisdiction where you live is the jurisdiction that would take the initial report. And they'll investigate it as much as they can, like we talked about earlier. And when I talk to people about these things, I always recommend they look at the website, the Federal Trade Commission's website. I think it's ftc.gov. Illinois Attorney General's office, not so much because they're going to help them, but more because there's additional information on things that the victims can do to try to alleviate or lessen the blow of the money that's lost.
Okay. And so is there any hope of recovering the losses, though? I mean, once you've reported it to local authorities, they're all doing the investigations. Do people ever get their money back?
Yes and no. Some do. If it's a local situation where the suspect might be more local, it's very possible that the money will be returned at some point. With overseas scams where people are providing money, less likely. And the reason I say that is mostly because the bank will reimburse most victims, but the bank will not always reimburse. For example, we talked about that scam where they send you a fake check.
Right.
You take that to your bank, that check ultimately comes back as a bad check. That will the banks are less likely to reimburse. Well, if they do reimburse the account, they're going to hold the account holder responsible for reimbursing the bank. So one way or another, the victim is still out that money. In some cases where it's a true scam that the victim just had their money taken from their account, the banks will oftentimes reimburse that money to them. So they will see the money back there, but then you have to worry about the investigative money that the person spends trying to correct the issue or fix it, whether it's through credit reporting agencies, if it's identity theft, things of that nature. The person's always going to be out some money out of their pocket. So to truly get it all back is probably not going to happen.
All right, so there's a chance, but no guarantees.
Right.
Okay. Are there a lot of charity scams? You know, like right now I know there's a lot of tornado relief going on in the northern part of the state, you know, near Gifford and Washington, Illinois. I could see scammers possibly getting out and trying to take people's money and never really get it to the tornado relief effort. So do we see things like that happening?
Locally, not too often, but is it out there and does it happen? Definitely. People, the bad guys and gals, they will take advantage of situations like this. There's some out there taking advantage of the issues with the Obamacare, the healthnet.gov, or what that website, healthcare.gov, and they will set up, because that's already confusing enough.
Right. Sometimes
donating money can be confusing, so they'll take that confusion and they'll roll with it. And people think they're signing up for their health care, and in actuality they're
giving their bank account information to a charity
fake
scam.
website or something like that. But yeah, anytime there's a major event, a tsunami, you know, whatever it might be, there's always good charities, and then there's the bad charities. Usually, if somebody's coming after you, harassing you, so to speak, to send money to them, it's probably not a legitimate charity. A lot of times you'll see with the Red Cross, they'll put a little something on Facebook, for example, you know, please send money for the victims in Washington, Illinois, things like that. That's probably more legitimate than what you'll see if you're just getting spam emails one after another asking for donations for these relief funds. Chances are it may not be legitimate.
So specific asks may be a little more dangerous then.
Yes, if they're coming at you unsolicited, so to speak, they're just throwing them at you, whether it's emails or messages on Facebook, probably need to question that.
Are there ways to look into where we're sending our money before we send it? You know, like you mentioned the Better Business Bureau and pages like that. Are there research we should be doing out there to make sure what we're giving to is safe?
Right. I would always, if all else fails and you're just not sure, find a phone number associated with what it is you're donating to, excuse me, and send, you know, make the phone call. That, again, doesn't guarantee that it's legitimate, because sophisticated scams will have a phone number, will have somebody that answers the phone, will continue to try to trick you into sending money. But if you're just not sure, don't send the money. I mean, you want to, I understand that, but if you're not sure where it's going, don't send it. There's always other ways to research and find. Maybe you could send it to an address, you know, mail it.
So your recommendation would be to do your homework then, I guess you'd say, before you go giving.
Yes, always do your homework. If you're not sure, if you're fairly confident that it is what it says it is or what it claims to be, go ahead and send your, you know, $10 or $20. Most people, when they give $10 or $20, it's not that big of a blow. But when they come to find out that, you know, there's 5,000 other people that gave $10 or $20, and then you find out it's a fictitious charity. Somebody's claiming that they've got a relative that's going through some sort of cancer therapy and things like that, and they set up those things in a convenience store, for example, and then you find out it was all a scam. It makes you angry, typically.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, the grand scheme of things, you're only out as an individual $10 or $20, but knowing that somebody scammed you and thousands of others can be very agitating.
And so if you suspect that you know, have been scammed or you're going to be scammed, something sounds fishy, you should call your local police department?
Yes, if you have any doubts. Charleston residents are good at calling us whenever there's people going door to door. In the city of Charleston, you have to have a permit to solicit door to door, and if they don't, we will run them off the best we can. But
Okay, so when in doubt, call the police.
Yep.
All right. Well, Detective West from the Charleston Police Department, we appreciate you coming on and talking about holiday scams, and we appreciate all of you for watching today. That wraps up At Issue for this week. And remember, if you have a topic you'd like to see on the show, email it to us at weiu@weiu.net. We'll see you next time.